This is a story, a mystery, that has sparked anger and now shocking new allegations. The body of 24-year-old Erica Bader was found in a wooded area, but police say she didn't die there. She was placed there. First, 6 people were arrested, but none for murder, only for failing to report her death, leaving a huge question. What really happened? When police searched her home, they found dozens of suffering animals. No food, no water. Her family says she was victimized long before her death and that cries for help went unanswered. But now, a devastating update. Erica was allegedly pregnant when she was killed. And the suspects, not 6 anymore, 8, and 5 now face murder charges. This case just entered a darker, more disturbing chapter. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Stewart. Hey guys, real quick, let's talk about this app Upside that gets you cash back on daily essentials like gas and groceries. Upside is easy to use. It's also free. I use it a lot when I pump gas. I get money back there. Place like 7-Eleven or Taco Bell, you can also get money back there. And we are talking about real cash back. So after you spend, money appears in your Upside account, then you transfer it straight to your bank. It's as easy as that. So here's what you do. Download the Upside app. It's free. Buy whatever you plan to like you typically would. Pay like you typically would with a debit or a credit card. Then you file a claim in the app and money comes back. To find out how much you could save with Upside, click the link in the description or scan the QR code on our screen and use promo code OTC to get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. You remember the case that we brought you last month, the mysterious death of 24-year-old Erica Bader. Police say her body was found in the woods, but believed to have been moved there. A house filled with dozens of abandoned animals, 6 people arrested, but none charged with her murder. That was last month. This week, everything changed. According to the Central Falls Police Department in Rhode Island and court records reviewed by WPRI and the Boston Globe, 5 of those suspects are now charged with murder. The victim's family also told WJAR-TV that she was pregnant when she was killed. And the number of people facing charges has grown from 6 to 8. The allegations are now more brutal than ever. And we're going to break down the shocking new details in this case. But first, let's recap the haunting mystery that started all of this. It all starts with a 24-year-old woman named Erica Bader. In late October of this year, police in Pawtucket, Rhode Island get a call. A body was found in a wooded area. They arrive, and it's Erica. But immediately, something is off. Police believe that Erica Bader didn't die there, that someone, or a group of people, had placed her body in those woods. So the first question is, where did she die and how? The investigation shifts then to the town over, Central Falls, Rhode Island. Police say Erica lived in a rented unit in a house on Central Street, and that's where this story took a sharp turn from a death investigation into something that feels gothic. Because when authorities went into that house, they weren't just looking for a crime scene, they walked into a nightmare. They found animals, dozens of them, 46 cats and 4 dogs, abandoned with no food or water. The conditions were so bad, officials had to wear masks to rescue them. At least 2 of the cats were pregnant. It was a full-scale animal seizure. And now the big looming question, what does this have to do with Erica's death? Was she living in these conditions? Was this part of something bigger? Police quickly zeroed in on 6 people. They arrested all of them, but here's what really raised eyebrows. None of them were charged with murder, not a single one. The charge? Failure to report a death. All 6 were accused of knowing that Erica was dead, but not telling anyone. But one of them, Erica's own roommate, a woman named Brittany Turpinning, faced an additional heavier charge, domestic violence felony assault. So, picture that was forming, it was grim. Based on the initial charges, police seemed to be saying that Erica was assaulted and she later died. And a group of people knew about it and they did nothing. They moved her body, they stayed silent. But Erica's family and friends were screaming that this wasn't just a sudden tragedy. According to reporting from WJAR, they said the warning signs were there for months. They told reporters that they had contacted police back in April, a full 6 months before her body was found. They had concerns for her well-being. They said that they believed that she was in danger in that house on Central Street in Central Falls. They allege that they tried to file reports, that Erica herself had reached out for help. One ex-boyfriend told WJAR back in October that she got on a video call and they could immediately tell something was wrong. The official response from Central Falls Police was that they did a wellness check in April, but they couldn't locate her, and that a missing persons report was never formally filed. So by last month, we were left with a haunting mystery. A young woman dead and moved. A house of horrors with abandoned animals, 6 people facing charges, but not for killing this girl, and a family's anguish that her cries for help went unheard until it was far too late. That was the case. That's what we knew. But as of this week, everything changed. The charges, the number of suspects, and the alleged brutality of what happened to Erica Bader have escalated in a way that is absolutely shocking to say the least. Now, this week, authorities dropped a bombshell update that completely reshapes this case. First, the charges. They have been upgraded, and dramatically. Remember, initially it was 6 people facing a single charge of failure to report a death. And now, court documents show it's 8 people facing a slate of serious felonies. 5 of the original suspects are now charged with murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy. Their names: Andrew Cornell, he's 28, Joshua Brunel, 35, Elizabeth Durant, she's 41, Stephanie Bletzer, 37, and Erica's roommate, Brittany Turpinning, 34 years old. And then there are 3 new suspects who were not in the initial round of arrests. They are charged with kidnapping, conspiracy, and failure to report a death. Their names: Christopher Kordaluski, he's 22, Joanne Miller, 26, and Cheryl Blakely, 36 years old. So 8 people, different ages, all of them were arraigned in court in Providence. The 5 facing murder were ordered held without bail. Now, secondly, we do have the family's devastating new allegations, because with these murder charges filed, Erica Bader's family is speaking out with horrific details in interviews. They say they have learned that Erica was pregnant when she was killed. Her stepmom, Crystal Smith, told reporters, quote, "They killed her and the baby." She said, "What happened to Erica is absolutely heartbreaking and horrific." Now, the family told WPRI that Erica, who they say was homeless and had nowhere else to go, fell in with these people at the Central Street house, and then they turned on her. Her stepmom claims that Erica was held against her will, saying, quote, "She tried to run away one time, they dragged her in, pulled her in that house, and held her hostage, basically." Now, the family's allegation is that she was attacked, raped, and then murdered in that home before her body was dumped in the woods in Pawtucket. Now, Central Falls mayor, her name's Maria Rivera, released a statement echoing Erica's family's pain, saying, quote, "My deepest condolences go to her family, her friends, and everyone who loved her. No family should ever experience this kind of pain or heartbreak. The investigation is now a major multi-agency effort involving local police, the Rhode Island Attorney General, and the state medical examiner." So where does this leave us? The core mysteries remain officially unsolved. The exact cause and date of Erica's death have not been publicly released by the medical examiner, but the narrative, it has violently shifted. Now, we've gone from a group of people possibly covering up a death to a scenario where prosecutors believe 5 people conspired to kidnap and murder a pregnant woman, with 3 others allegedly helping in that plot. Erica's stepmom stood outside the courthouse in Providence, and she said what her family is going through, saying, quote, "I'm glad they're where they're at, and I hope they stay there." Joining us now, once again, to talk a little bit more about this is Will Corman, criminal defense attorney. Thank you for joining us to talk about this case involving Erica Bader in Rhode Island, not far from where you are. I want to start with her cause of death, because we still don't know that at this point, yet you have these suspects who have been charged with murder. How do you charge someone with murder without at least publicly disclosing how this woman died?
Well, I think there's no obligation on behalf of law enforcement to publicly disclose it. I think it's fairly obvious from when they looked at the body that the cause of death was murder, not to mention the fact that she was unfortunately unceremoniously dumped in the woods. My guess is that it was clear early on exactly what had happened to her.
Because I know they're being held without bond, you don't need to present that part of the story to the judge if you're a prosecutor as of yet, just when it comes to determining whether or not there's enough there for someone to be held without bond.
I'm sure that they were able to explain to the court exactly what the steps were that led them to charge these folks with murder. I think the actual cause of death isn't necessarily something that needs to be explained right away at an arraignment. Obviously, at some point it's going to have to come out, but I think in the very, very beginning, it's not necessary, especially if it's very clear that the cause of death was a homicide. I think the actual manner in which it took place is something that can be vague for a little while still.
The last time we spoke, which I think was in early November, as this story was starting to make headlines, and we really didn't know a lot other than her body was found in Pawtucket, which is a town over from where she was living in Central Falls, that her body was left there, and that we had these suspects who were arrested, and then it was kind of, the charges were somewhat vague in terms of the role in the story. But now you have 5 of them facing murder charges. What typically goes on over the last couple of weeks to get to the point where it's not just people who knew about, according to prosecutors, someone's death and they didn't tell anyone about it, that actually they took part in it and that they allegedly say it was a murder?
My guess is that a few things happened. Obviously, the police interviewed everybody and anybody who they thought could possibly be connected to it. And as we talked about a month or so ago, I'm sure that some of these folks who are tangentially related to it decided they wanted to get out in front of it. It wouldn't be surprising if somewhere down the road we find out that some of the folks who were charged with some of the lesser crimes actually were cooperating with law enforcement in order to explain exactly what happened and who did what.
And looking at the 5 suspects, of the 8 now, by the way, who are facing these charges, and it's murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy. I mean, those are some heavy charges. The allegations that the family has put in saying that Erica Bader was allegedly held against her will inside this home, not to mention she was pregnant, according to her family. What does that tell you about how strong of a case the prosecution may have when you level those charges, you levy those charges against someone, and in this case, 5 people?
I think that Ms. Bader's cause of death, the fact that it was a homicide, was never really a question. I think that when these individuals were originally charged with failing to report a dead body and things along those lines, we were building towards the inevitable conclusion that someone was actually going to get charged with her death. It's clear that this scenario was even more horrific than we originally thought. My understanding is there's allegations of sexual assault. We didn't know she was pregnant at the time when we spoke a month or so ago. So this crime, which was already horrific, has just been taken to the next level.
What are some of the challenges that prosecutors could face when it comes to, you have 8 total people facing charges and then 5 of them facing the most serious charges?
I think what may end up happening is the individuals will start pointing the finger at one another. Unless someone is going to say that she was killed by this specific person, the other individuals are going to say, it wasn't me, it was him, it wasn't me, it was her. So the prosecution is going to have to sort through all that because, again, everyone at some point is going to be looking out for their own best interests. And so in order to cut through all that, the prosecution is going to have to make deals with some of these folks. Whoever they make deals with, they're already going to have been involved in something. So no one walks into this with clean hands.
And when it comes to the home that she was living in, it's this apartment building, looks like it was kind of a duplex or like maybe a home that was turned into an apartment building. There wasn't a lot of units in there, but the family says that Erica Bader was homeless. She had nowhere to go, so she had to stay at this house. And then they just described that she tried to escape at one point. They say that these people had pulled her back in, that all of them, that they kind of worked together to almost... no one's facing a torture charge, but it certainly sounds like that just from what the family's alleging. Just what do you make of the dynamic of this story as it's come to light?
I mean, it is very, very sad, and it's very, very tragic. And those words are almost glib because they don't quite manifest exactly what was going on here. Now, while there's no torture charge right now or anything along those lines, the murder itself could encapsulate just some of the horrific things that this young lady endured.
And when it comes to 5 people facing murder charges, say there's one person who, and this is just, we're speculating, but I know that Brittany Turpinning, who was facing that domestic violence charge originally, let's say she's the one who physically, allegedly, killed Erica Bader. how do you prove the 5 other people like had a role to actually face the same charge as the person who allegedly did it?
Sure. There's also conspiracy charges, so they could also have participated in some manner to some extent. Again, it's early on. I think this will continue to be shaken up to figure out exactly who's going to get charged with what. The fact that there are charges right now levied against these 5 individuals, that doesn't necessarily mean that those charges will stay against those individuals. Some folks will undoubtedly cut deals in order to get out from under some of the more serious charges. But as far as what the other folks are alleged to have done, first of all, it's still a little bit of a mystery as to who's alleged to have done what. But if there was one main actor and other folks were involved either negligently or providing weaponry or helping hide the body or things along those lines, they could all be encompassed under that murder charge.
What's the role or the strategy of a defense attorney right now for one of the 5? Especially if the person who's facing a murder charge, they tell you that they weren't the main actor in this. How do you approach the defense for that person?
So I would say that in this particular set of facts and circumstances, there's 2 options. One is, as I said before, it's every man and woman for themselves. So if my client had information, my client was being charged with murder, this horrific murder, and my client had information as to exactly who it was, but it wasn't my client. In this particular set of facts and circumstances, I would encourage my client to sit down with me and law enforcement and explain exactly what went on. There's no more serious charge than a murder, and here we have a murder of a pregnant woman. So I would encourage my clients to step forward and say whatever they needed to in order to get that charge removed from them. Secondly, it's also going to be very confusing because there are a number of people charged with the same offense. So even if my client did not want to sit down with law enforcement and explain what his or her role was in contrast to others, essentially it becomes a finger-pointing game. And we would need to clarify exactly what my client knew, where my client was, in order to say, while my client may have been there, and while my client may have been a minor participant, here are the people who really did it, and this is how we can show you that.
And on the part of this story, which makes it so sad that Erica Bader was allegedly pregnant at the time, her family is saying that. They also say that she's the victim of sexual assault. The suspects don't appear to be facing charges on the sexual assault part of it. And police they've been pretty tight-lipped. But if she was pregnant, could there be more charges that the suspects faced in this case?
So some jurisdictions do allow for a homicide charge to be levied against an unborn child. It may depend on how far along she was in the pregnancy and whether or not anyone else knew that she was pregnant. There is a difference, again, without sounding terribly graphic, between an individual who's several months pregnant and an individual who's several days pregnant.
How does this play out now in the court system? Because you have 8 people, all of them could have very different stories about what happened, but we're all talking about the death of the same woman. Are these 8 different separate court proceedings that will be going on?
The government's going to do everything they can to try these cases together, or at least try these cases in groupings, if you will. If there are 5 people who they absolutely are convinced jointly murdered this young woman, then they will attempt to try those 5 cases together. From a defense attorney standpoint, I want my client to be tried separately. I'm going to do everything I can to sever the charges and sever my client from the other, while the government's looking to group them together.
How difficult is it in a case like this to get a judge to allow the cases to be severed?
It's going to be difficult. I think it's going to be difficult. Again, while we don't know everything or all the facts and circumstances, what courts try to do is avoid trying the same case over and over and over again. So part of it would depend on whether or not anyone made statements inculpating other folks. Part of it would depend on whether or not there's a repetitive set of evidence. I think that it is likely that at least a few of these folks will be tried together, if not all 5.
When it comes to flipping someone and getting one of the defendants to potentially testify against another to be a witness, what does that, we've all seen it on hate to use the cliche, but we've seen it in the movies and Law and Order, how it goes. But in real life, what are those negotiations like? And then also, I think for a prosecutor too, I mean, if you're trying to get someone who is charged with murder to testify against someone else who's charged with murder, I could see, the defense argument being like, this person is just trying to get out of this. How do you make sure that that person actually is, as a prosecutor, a credible person on the stand?
Well, what the prosecution often says is, we're dealing with a horrific crime scene and we have to take the witnesses as they come. We don't get to choose who our witnesses are. We don't get to choose who eyewitnesses are to certain events. And the prosecution will do everything they can to deflate the defense argument, which is, how can you trust this guy? He's looking to get himself out from under it. And the prosecutor literally will just have to explain, look, we had 5 people who were charged. This person we determined had enough information that we were willing to change the charges or accept this person's version of events in exchange for prosecuting the bad actors.
Whatever the reason is that this allegedly happened, it'll never make sense. I mean, we all know that. I mean, this is just a horrific story. At the same time, there is that question of why, like how it could happen. As a prosecutor, how important would it be to actually find a motive in this case as to why Erica Bader was allegedly killed?
And motives are always important. Prosecutors want to explain a story as to why something happened. They don't have to. Motive is not an element of the crime that needs to be proved in any way. But the prosecution is going to want to come up with something, because otherwise the defense stands up and says, why on earth would Joe Smith commit this crime? It makes no sense. Why would he do this? And in order to rebut that, the prosecution is going to come up with a version of events.
And then there's also, and we talked about this last time, the family has said, friends have said, that they tried to warn Central Falls Police that something was going to happen to Erica Bader, that she seemed concerned on a FaceTime call back in the spring, that there was some issue going on inside that home, and Central Falls Police, they claim, dropped the ball. Now, police have said that that's not the case. They did everything they could. From the family's point of view, if they were to get representation, how do you go about figuring out whether or not police did the right thing when it came to some of the warning signs that apparently the family says were there for Erica Bader?
I think the Central Falls Police Department is in the hot seat here. Based upon what you and I have talked about and what I've read, it seems as if people were trying to get the police to take this originally missing person far more seriously than they were. From the police department standpoint, I would hope they would chronicle and write down every single thing they did, every single phone call that came in, and every lead they followed up on. If those pieces of the puzzle are missing, again, I think that there's some responsibility there and some culpability.
How have you seen, and Erica Bader was reportedly homeless at one point. She had nowhere to go, which is how she wound up at this house in Central Falls. And we do see a lot of cases where people of her age, they just go missing and they're adults and it's not searching for a minor where you would have like an Amber Alert out there. We'll see what, any sort of investigation or more details that come out from police in Rhode Island. But I mean, generally speaking, just as someone who worked in a prosecutor's office, I mean, how seriously do police departments take some of these missing persons cases? Because there are a lot more than I think we realize.
Yeah, I think they probably take them very seriously, but they are limited. Again, if a legal adult chooses to disappear off the grid, then that's their right to do so. So it is complicated. I think in this case, it was a little more than that. This wasn't just, we haven't heard from our friend Erica in a while. It was, we haven't heard from our friend Erica in a while, and these are the reasons why we're concerned. So it wasn't just this, hey, this person may be off the grid. It's, hey, we have some real concerns about where this person is, who she was with. There's been some information that she was uncomfortable in the living situation that she had, and therefore that's a little different than someone just not disappearing for a little while, an adult disappearing for a little while.
Yeah, in this story, it's so sad. There's a lot of layers to it as well, and certainly on the legal side of it and where this case will go from here. Will Corman, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, thank you as always for taking the time to be with us on Law and Crime. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.